just extraordinary out of the United States. We have the graphic here showing just how big this spike has been. Can you talk us through just how historic? Well, I should have a graphic. There it is. You can see.
It's a lovely chart. It's a fantastic chart, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, and leaving that chart there.
Goodness.
Yeah, so I mean, the best thing to look at there is that you can see 2009 is on that chart, and that's the GFC, and it is literally a blip inside of that jobless claims chart that you've got on screen. It is now around about 7.5 times the peak of the issue that was going on in the GFC. And not only that, we know that this is from last week in terms of those numbers. So it doesn't include what's happened over the last 6 days in the States either. And we know from basically anecdotal evidence that upwards of 10 million people have left the workforce in the US. What is on tonight is non-farm payrolls, and that is their employment numbers. The president for a long, long time has been, and rightly so, been able to say that the unemployment rate in the US has been as low as it has been since 1950s in terms of what they've been at 3 points. It got down as low as 3.4. It was sitting at 3.7% before the read tonight. That is going to spike in terms of what we see. The question now is how high does it get there? And there are some forecasting that US unemployment could get as high as 15%, maybe even as bad as 17% over the coming months as they lock down the country even more so. The next question also that becomes is wages. Wages in the States were growing quite neatly. They were growing at a level that the rest of the world was probably a little bit envious of. That also now is under question, considering that they don't have the same level of government assistance that's been given in places like Europe, but also here in Australia, and how the economy sustains itself through this period with that kind of level of contraction in employment and contraction in wages.
Yeah, how much do you trust a guy who's been taking credit for the tide without his hand on the rudder? Now, big week in Australia as well, though. RBA home loan data, the trade balance coming out too. These are all going to be significant things to watch.
They are. Look, in terms of looking at that, the RBA is probably now on an emergency footing. So there are people asking the question, are we going to actually see more of a stimulus package coming out on Tuesday? Probably not. What they're more likely to say is that they are ready to go. There is probably going to be a discussion paper about whether or not they're going to actually look at buying corporate bonds in Australia, something they've never done before in terms of that side. So that's the next part of the question. As you alluded to, trade balance is out. Now, the interesting thing is that that trade balance will bridge the end of February, start of March. It is for the March numbers. We are likely to see a slightly okay number there because we actually saw the Chinese start to pick up supply at the back end of March. And not only that, we saw iron ore prices being slightly better than what we forecasted, sitting at around about 86 to 87 US dollars a tonne. And also over the month of March, the Aussie dollar fell from about 67 cents to as low as 58 cents. So there are slight benefits in the trade balance, but again, I don't think it's that. The one to really watch is what comes out next Thursday, which is the financial stability report. Normally something we don't watch at all, but this week it's obviously only watched very closely because there's a big question that everybody's asking after the Bank of New Zealand and also the Bank of England put out to their banks, their private banks, not to pay dividends. The financial stability report is around that idea of whether or not we have an unquestionably strong banking sector. We do. The question now is whether or not APRA also follows suit and looks at ways of trying to make sure that banks keep as much capital on their balance sheets as they can during this period. Does that mean dividends go? That's a question we're going to have to wait and see.